New revelations have emerged about Prince Andrew's secret legal deal with Virginia Giuffre. According to her upcoming memoir, Nobody's Girl, Giuffre says that she agreed to a one-year gag order to stop her case from overshadowing Queen Elizabeth II's Platinum Jubilee. The book claims that Andrew insisted on the silence clause as part of their settlement in 2022. And tonight, GB News can bring you even more exclusive revelations with the only British journalist to have access to the memoir before it's released next week, The Telegraph's chief.
Okay, so this is absolutely massive. The prosecutor who handled Jeffrey Epstein's sex trafficking case has come forward with explosive evidence that allegedly implicates President Trump in a widespread fraud scheme. We're not just talking about conspiracy theories or vague allegations here. We're talking about a federal prosecutor revealing documented financial manipulation connected to Epstein and his network. Here's what's being alleged. The prosecutor has revealed evidence showing that financial statements related to Epstein-linked properties were deliberately manipulated. And the purpose? To conceal Trump's financial benefits from these assets and to avoid regulatory scrutiny. So let me break that down. We're talking about properties and assets connected to Epstein's criminal enterprise. And according to this prosecutor, Trump and his allies engaged in fraudulent valuation of these assets, basically lying about what they're worth, in order to hide the fact that Trump was benefiting financially from Epstein-connected holdings. This happened over a period from July through October 2025. So this isn't ancient history, this is recent conduct that's being exposed right now. And the implications are staggering because it potentially connects Trump directly to financial benefits from Epstein's network, while simultaneously showing efforts to cover that up. But it gets worse. Investigations have also uncovered that Trump's administration actively stalled the release of grand jury files containing evidence about Epstein's criminal network. Remember when we talked about Kash Patel hiding Epstein files and getting sanctioned by a judge? Well, this goes even deeper. Pam Bondi's office, she's Trump's attorney general, has been accused of actively suppressing documents related to the Epstein case. So we've got a pattern here. FBI director hiding files, attorney general suppressing documents, and now a prosecutor revealing that there was fraudulent financial manipulation to hide Trump's connections to Epstein assets. Trump's response? Predictably, he called it a Democrat con job and a hoax. He's claiming this is all just political persecution designed to distract from what he calls his great 6 months of service. But here's the problem with that defense. We're talking about a federal prosecutor who handled the actual Epstein case. This isn't some partisan political operative. This is someone with direct knowledge of the investigation revealing documented evidence. Legal experts are saying that the growing volume of undisclosed documents challenges Trump's hoax narrative. Because if this was all made up, why are there so many documents being hidden? Why did Kash Patel lie about court orders preventing release? Why is Pam Bondi's office suppressing grand jury files? Why was there fraudulent valuation of Epstein-linked assets? All of those questions point to something being covered up, and the more we learn, the worse it looks. All right, so let's talk about how this Epstein-related fraud connects to Trump's broader pattern of financial misconduct. Because this isn't happening in isolation, this is part of a bigger picture. The probe connects to ongoing New York civil fraud investigations against Trump. Those investigations have revealed that Trump routinely inflated asset valuations to secure loans and investments. He'd tell banks his properties were worth way more than they actually were in order to get better loan terms. Then he'd tell tax authorities those same properties were worth way less to pay lower taxes. That's textbook fraud, and it's been documented extensively in the New York cases. But now we're seeing that this same pattern, fraudulent valuation to hide financial benefits and avoid scrutiny, extends to Epstein-connected assets too. So what this prosecutor is revealing isn't just about Epstein. It's about a systematic pattern where Trump and his organization manipulate financial statements to serve whatever purpose they need at the moment. Need a loan? Inflate the values? Need to hide benefits from Epstein assets? Manipulate the valuations. Need to pay less in taxes? Deflate the values. The financial statements related to Epstein-linked properties being deliberately manipulated tells us a few things. First, Trump had financial interests connected to Epstein. Second, those financial interests were significant enough that Trump felt he needed to hide them. Third, Trump was willing to commit fraud to conceal those connections. And here's what makes this particularly damning. We're not just talking about private business dealings anymore. Trump is president. His attorney general is suppressing Epstein documents. His FBI director lied about why files couldn't be released. This is the power of the federal government being used to cover up Trump's personal connections to a convicted sex trafficker. Think about what that means. Epstein ran a sex trafficking operation that abused underage girls. He had connections to powerful men across politics, business, and entertainment. And now we're learning that Trump potentially had financial benefits from Epstein-connected assets and used fraud to hide those benefits. Okay, so let's talk about the cover-up aspect, because that might actually be worse than the underlying fraud. Because it's one thing to have had financial dealings with Epstein before his crimes were fully exposed. It's another thing entirely to use the power of the presidency to hide those dealings and suppress evidence. The stalling of grand jury file releases is significant. Grand juries heard testimony and saw evidence about Epstein's criminal network. Those files potentially contain information about who was involved, who knew what, who benefited from the operation. And Trump's administration has been blocking the release of that information. Why? If Trump had nothing to do with Epstein beyond casual social contact years ago, why would his administration work so hard to keep these files hidden? The fact that they're suppressing documents suggests those documents contain information they don't want public. Pam Bondi's office being accused of document suppression is particularly problematic because she's supposed to be the nation's chief law enforcement officer. Her job is to pursue justice, not to protect the president from embarrassing revelations. But according to these allegations, that's exactly what she's doing. And we've already covered how Kash Patel, the FBI director, got sanctioned by a judge for lying about why Epstein files couldn't be released. So you've got the attorney general suppressing documents and the FBI director lying about court orders. That's a coordinated cover-up using federal law enforcement agencies. Trump's claim that this is all a Democrat con job doesn't hold up when you look at the facts. These are federal prosecutors and judges, not all of them Democrats, calling out the misconduct. The judge who sanctioned Kash Patel wasn't making a partisan political statement. The prosecutor revealing the fraud scheme isn't a Democratic operative. The connection to Trump's broader legal troubles is important too. The New York fraud cases have already established a pattern of financial manipulation. Multiple criminal investigations have documented Trump's willingness to obstruct justice and hide evidence. And now we're seeing that same pattern with Epstein-related matters. Bipartisan demands for transparency are growing because even Republicans who support Trump on policy are uncomfortable with the idea that Epstein files are being hidden, and that fraud was potentially committed to conceal financial benefits from a sex trafficking network. The political implications heading into 2026 are significant. Democrats are going to hammer this. They're going to argue that Trump is covering up connections to a sex trafficker, that he used fraud to hide financial benefits, and that he's corrupting federal law enforcement to protect himself. And Trump's supporters are going to have a harder time dismissing this as partisan attacks because we're talking about documented fraud, suppressed evidence, and officials getting sanctioned by judges. This isn't speculation. This is prosecutors and courts making findings based on actual evidence. The prosecutor exposing this took a significant risk. Federal prosecutors don't just make stuff up. They don't reveal information about cases lightly. The fact that this prosecutor felt compelled to come forward and expose this fraud scheme suggests the evidence is strong and the cover-up is serious enough to warrant public disclosure. Trump, dismissing supporters who are concerned about the Epstein connections as weaklings is also telling. Because instead of addressing the substance of the allegations, he's attacking people, including his own supporters, who have legitimate questions about his ties to Epstein. The volume of undisclosed documents is a huge problem for Trump's narrative. He claims there's nothing to hide, that it's all a hoax. But then why are there thousands of documents being hidden? Why did his FBI director lie to Congress and get sanctioned? Why is his attorney general suppressing grand jury files? Why was there fraudulent valuation of Epstein-linked assets? All of those actions suggest there's something in those documents and files that Trump desperately doesn't want the public to see. And the more his administration works to hide evidence, the more suspicious it looks. The intersection of criminal investigations, presidential business dealings, and what the prosecutor calls shadowy elites feeds into public concerns about corruption at the highest levels. People across the political spectrum want to know who was involved with Epstein, how deep the network went, and whether powerful people are being protected. And right now, all the evidence suggests Trump's administration is doing exactly that. Protecting powerful people by hiding evidence and committing fraud to conceal financial connections. That's not a partisan observation. That's what the documented actions show. The question going forward is whether Congress will investigate, whether courts will force document releases, and whether prosecutors will pursue charges for the alleged fraud. Because if Trump and his allies can successfully cover this up using the power of federal law enforcement, it sets a terrible precedent for accountability. This story isn't going away. The more documents that eventually come out, the more questions there will be. And Trump's strategy of calling everything a hoax and attacking anyone who asks questions isn't going to work when federal prosecutors are revealing documented fraud schemes and judges are sanctioning his officials for lying. The American people deserve to know the truth about Trump's connections to Epstein, about any financial benefits he received from Epstein-linked assets, and about why his administration has worked so hard to hide that information. And prosecutors like this one coming forward to expose the fraud are essential to ensuring that truth eventually comes out.